What if the party you thought was harmless turned deadly? Who, or what, was really behind the shadows and the confetti? And when the clock struck midnight, why did no one make it out alive? They chose the rooftop because it felt controlled. A private New Year's Eve party in downtown Chicago. 30 floors above the street. Keycard access. Security desk downstairs. The kind of place where nothing unexpected was supposed to happen. That was the selling point. 15 guests arrived between 9 and 11. Mostly co-workers from a consulting firm that had just survived a round of layoffs. A few spouses. A couple of friends no one knew very well. Everyone assumed they belonged to someone else. The wind was strong but manageable. The city below glowed with anticipation. Fireworks crews were visible on distant rooftops, setting up early. Someone joked that it looked like the city was holding its breath. At 11:40 p.m., one of the elevators stopped responding. People noticed only because someone wanted to go downstairs to smoke. Security answered the call and said it was routine. The elevator would reset shortly. No concern. No rush. At 11:47, the temperature dropped. Not dramatically. Just enough for people to comment on it. Someone pulled their coat tighter. Another joked about global warming being selective. At 11:52, a man arrived that no one remembered inviting. He came up the service stairs. No coat check ticket. No drink in his hand. He looked out of place without being obvious about it. Dark coat. Clean shoes. Hair neatly combed. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Someone asked if he wanted champagne. He shook his head politely and said, "Not yet." He didn't introduce himself. Instead, he walked to the edge of the rooftop and stood there, hands resting lightly on the railing, looking out over the city like he was waiting for something specific to happen. A woman from accounting whispered, "Who's that?" No one answered. At 11:55, the music cut out. Not a dramatic failure. Just silence. The speaker light stayed on, but no sound came through. Someone tried reconnecting Bluetooth. Another tried Spotify. Nothing worked. Phone still had signal. The city noise below was still there. It was just the music. At 11:57, someone finally asked the man who he knew. He turned slowly like he'd been expecting the question. "I was here last year," he said. People laughed, assuming it was a joke. One man said, "This is our first time renting the space." The stranger smiled slightly. "That's what they said last year too." The laugh that followed was thinner. At 11:59, the countdown started. 10, 9, 8. Fireworks ignited across the skyline. 7, 6. The man stepped back from the railing. 5, 4. He spoke quietly but clearly. "You should go inside now." 3, 2. Someone scoffed and raised their glass. 1. Midnight. Cheers erupted. Glasses clinked. Phones came out for photos. And then a scream cut through the celebration. A woman near the edge was shaking. She said the street looked wrong. They thought she meant the fireworks. She pointed down. The street was empty. No cars. No movement. No flashing lights. Just stillness like the city had been drained. Someone leaned over to look closer. The fireworks froze. Not faded. Not finished. Frozen midair. Hanging unlit, silent. The wind stopped. The stranger exhaled slowly. "This part usually happens faster," he said. Someone demanded to know what he meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward the building's entrance far below. Emergency vehicles were arriving. Police, fire trucks, ambulances. More than necessary. Someone checked their phone. News alerts appeared all at once. Breaking, rooftop collapse. Multiple casualties reported. Timestamp, 12:01 a.m. Photos loaded slowly. The building. Their building. The rooftop. Collapsed. Someone dropped their phone. Another person whispered, "That's us." Panic exploded. People ran for the stairwell. The door wouldn't open. Someone slammed it harder. Someone else screamed to call security. The elevator indicator was blank. The stranger finally turned to face them fully. "This is the moment where people panic," he said calmly. Someone grabbed his coat and demanded answers. He didn't resist. "Last year," he continued, "most of them ran too." A woman asked through tears, "Ran where?" He looked down again. "They never stay long enough to understand." The rooftop trembled. Cracks spidered across the concrete. Dust rose from beneath their feet. Below, the crowd grew larger. Reporters arrived. Camera flashes popped. Someone realized something unbearable. They weren't watching the future. They were watching the replay. Midnight again. The countdown echoed faintly, distorted, looping. The stranger stepped back toward the edge. "You can leave," he said softly. "Or you can remember." The rooftop gave way. Since then, the building hosts no New Year events. But every year, at exactly midnight, security cameras capture movement on the rooftop. 15 figures standing still. And one man at the edge, waiting for the celebration to begin again. This happened about 3 years ago, and even now, I still avoid talking about it in detail. Not because I don't remember it clearly, but because every time I do, I start noticing small things around me that shouldn't matter but suddenly do. It was my cousin Daniel's birthday. Nothing special. He was turning 29 and we decided to keep it small. Just family, a few close friends, food, music, and drinks. He rented a modest house outside town for the night. The kind of place people use for gatherings because no neighbors complain. 1 floor, big living room, backyard, nothing unusual. We arrived just before sunset. The house already felt warm and loud, music playing, people laughing, bottles opening. If you walked in at that moment, you'd think nothing bad had ever happened there. I remember noticing how normal everything felt. That's important. By around 9 p.m., the party was in full swing. People were drinking, dancing, talking over each other. Someone suggested taking group photos. We lined up in the living room, arms around shoulders, smiling. The flash went off twice. Later, when I looked at those photos, I noticed something odd. But not yet. Around 10:30, Daniel opened his gifts. One of them didn't have a name on it. Just brown wrapping paper, no card. He laughed it off, assumed someone forgot to sign it. Inside was an old wristwatch. Not expensive, but heavy. Scratched. Like it had been worn for years. Daniel put it on as a joke and said it felt weirdly tight, even though it fit perfectly. That was the first moment I felt uncomfortable, though I couldn't explain why. At midnight we did the cake. Candles lit, everyone counting down. When we sang, I remember thinking the room sounded slightly off. Like one extra voice. Not louder, just delayed. Half a second behind everyone else. I looked around. Everyone was visible. After the cake, people started stepping outside to smoke or get air. The backyard was dark except for string lights. I went out with Daniel for a cigarette. That's when he asked me something that still bothers me. "Did you invite someone I don't recognize?" he said. I asked who. He nodded toward the kitchen window. "That guy. He's been standing there for a while." I looked. There was a man near the counter, facing away from us. Tall. Dark jacket. He wasn't talking to anyone. Just standing there like he was waiting. I told Daniel maybe it was one of my friends. But it wasn't. I knew everyone there. When we went back inside, the man was gone. I brushed it off. People started leaving around 1:30 a.m. One by one, cars pulling away. By 2 o'clock, only 6 of us were left. Daniel, me, my sister, his girlfriend, and 2 friends. The house felt different when it got quiet. Every sound stood out. Floorboards. Glass clinking. A faint ticking sound. The watch. Daniel kept checking it, saying it wasn't moving, even though seconds were clearly passing. At 2:17 a.m. the power went out. Not dramatic. No sparks. Just silence and darkness. Phones came out immediately. Flashlights on. Everyone laughing nervously, making jokes. But that ticking sound didn't stop. It was louder now. We gathered in the living room. My sister asked if anyone else felt cold. Daniel said he felt dizzy. His girlfriend told him to sit down. Then we heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the hallway leading to the spare bedroom. None of us had gone in there. We stood still, listening. The steps stopped just outside the door. Then the handle turned. The door opened. There was no one there. But the room felt occupied. The air changed. Thick. Pressed. Daniel stood up and said, "Okay, that's enough." Then he stopped mid-sentence. He looked down at his wrist. The watch was ticking backwards. Before anyone could react, Daniel collapsed. Not dramatically. He just folded. Like his body gave up. We called an ambulance. Tried waking him. His pulse was weak but there. The power came back on while we waited. Lights flooded the room like nothing had happened. At the hospital, doctors said it was a seizure. Stress. Alcohol. Nothing more. But Daniel was different after that night. He stopped sleeping. He said time felt wrong around him. That minutes stretched. That mirrors lagged. He swore people finished his sentences before he spoke them. 3 weeks later, Daniel disappeared. No signs of struggle. His car parked normally. Phone left behind. Watch on the kitchen table. Still ticking. Backward. The police ruled it a voluntary disappearance. Stress. Mental health. But sometimes on my birthday, or anyone's birthday, when the room gets loud and everyone starts counting down, I swear I hear an extra voice again. Always half a second late. And I never stay till the candles go out anymore. I didn't want to go to the wedding. Not because I disliked the couple, but because something about it felt rushed. They'd announced the date barely a month earlier. No long engagement, no explanations. Just a message saying, it has to be this day. The wedding was held in a small countryside church, the kind that looks peaceful from the outside and empty even when it's full. Old stone walls, narrow windows, wooden pews that creaked when you shifted your weight. It was a daytime ceremony. Bright sun outside. Inside, it felt dim no matter how many lights were on. I was seated near the back. From where I sat, I could see the entire aisle and the heavy wooden door behind the guests. That door stayed slightly open the whole time, even after someone tried to shut it. The bride arrived late. Almost 20 minutes. People whispered, checked phones, smiled awkwardly. When she finally walked in, everyone stood. She looked beautiful, pale dress, calm face, but there was something off in her expression. She wasn't nervous. She looked tired. Like she hadn't slept in days. As she walked down the aisle, she kept glancing to her left, toward the empty pews near the wall. No one was sitting there. Still her eyes kept going back. When she reached the altar, the priest began. His voice echoed strangely, as if the church was larger than it appeared. Halfway through the vows, the bride stopped speaking. At first, people thought she was emotional. The groom whispered something to her, smiling. But she didn't respond. She just stared past him. Then she said quietly, "He's here." The groom laughed nervously. "Who?" She shook her head. "He said he wouldn't come." A few guests chuckled, thinking it was a joke. The priest cleared his throat and tried to continue. That's when the temperature dropped. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean people physically reacted. Someone pulled their jacket tighter. Another rubbed their arms. The church felt suddenly cold, like a door to winter had opened somewhere inside. The bride turned slowly and looked down the aisle. I followed her gaze. The back door was wider now, and someone was standing there. At first glance, it looked like a shadow shaped like a man. No clear face. Just darkness where features should be. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stood between the light and the doorway. No one screamed. That's what still confuses me. People noticed it, but reacted like they were seeing something they weren't allowed to acknowledge. Eyes flicked toward it, then away. Bodies stiffened. Conversations died without explanation. The priest's voice faltered. The bride dropped her bouquet. When it hit the floor, the shadow stepped forward. Just one step. The door slammed shut behind it. Every light in the church flickered at once. The groom finally turned around and froze. He whispered her name. She backed away from him, tears streaming down her face now. "You said it was over?" she sobbed. "You promised." The shadow moved again. Another step. That's when the bride screamed. The sound was raw, animal, and completely broke whatever spell the room was under. People stood up, chairs scraping. Someone shouted to run. But no one could move. It felt like the air itself had weight. The shadow stopped in the middle of the aisle and raised its head. I swear, I heard my name whispered. Not aloud. Inside my head. Then everything went black. I woke up outside, lying on the grass with several others. Sirens in the distance. People crying. The church doors were wide open, sunlight flooding inside like nothing had happened. The bride was gone. So was the groom. Police said they must have fled together. Cold feet. Panic. Embarrassment. But the bride's parents said something different. They said she had been engaged once before. Years earlier. The man died suddenly in a car accident just days before the wedding. She never spoke of him again. Until the night before this ceremony. Her mother told me the bride woke up screaming, saying he'd found her, that he was angry she tried to marry someone else. The church was closed permanently after that day. Official reason: structural damage. Unofficially, locals say weddings fail when held there. Engagements break. Couples separate. Some don't make it home together. And sometimes, if you stand outside at dusk, you can hear a woman crying inside, calling out an apology. The town called it Founders' Night. Once a year, everyone gathered in the central square to celebrate the day the town was established. Food stalls, fireworks, music, speeches. Nothing unusual. Families brought children. Old people sat on folding chairs. Teenagers recorded everything on their phones. By 9 p.m. the square was packed. What most people didn't know was that Founders' Night used to be called something else. Before the banners, before the fireworks, before it became a celebration, it was a memorial. The first sign that something was wrong came when the clock tower stopped. It was supposed to ring at exactly 9:15, signaling the start of the fireworks. But the hands froze at 9:14. People laughed at first. Someone joked that even the clock was drunk. Then the power cut out. Not completely, just enough that the stage lights went dim and the speakers let out a long, distorted screech. Phones lit up the square instead, hundreds of small white screens floating in the dark. The mayor stepped forward anyway and began his speech, voice shaky but loud enough. He never finished the first sentence. A woman screamed near the fountain. Everyone turned. A man had collapsed face first onto the stone pavement. At first, people assumed it was a heart attack. Someone shouted for space. Another called emergency services. But then the man started moving. Not standing. Not convulsing. Dragging himself. His fingers clawed at the ground as if he were trying to pull himself away from something beneath him. His mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. Just breath. Sharp, terrified gasps. Then his body went still. Silence spread through the crowd in a way that felt unnatural. Even children stopped crying. Even dogs went quiet. And then another person collapsed. Then another. Not near each other. Scattered across the square. People panicked. Screaming. Pushing. Parents grabbing children. Someone tripped, and when they tried to get up, they froze, staring at the ground like they'd seen something crawl out of it. I remember looking down at the stone beneath my feet. There were markings I'd never noticed before. Faint lines carved into the pavement. Old symbols worn down by decades of footsteps. Circles. Names. Dates. Dates from over 100 years ago. That's when the smell hit. Burned wood. Smoke. And something metallic. Someone shouted, "Fire!" But there was no fire. There was something worse. The fountain at the center of the square began to overflow, not with water but with dark liquid that spilled onto the stones and followed the carvings like they were channels. People screamed louder now. Phones dropped. No one was filming anymore. Then the screaming stopped. Not because people calmed down. Because the sound was drowned out. The clock tower began ringing. Not one bell. All of them. Overlapping. Out of rhythm. Too fast. With every ring, a pressure built in my chest like my lungs were being squeezed. Shapes began to form in the crowd. At first, I thought they were people pushing forward. Then I realized they were coming up. Figures rose from the ground along the carved lines, black silhouettes, incomplete, like shadows without owners. Some were missing limbs. Some dragged ropes behind them. Others had no faces at all. A voice echoed through the square. Not from speakers. From everywhere. "You built joy on our grave." I don't remember running, but I remember being far from the square when the fireworks finally went off. They exploded perfectly in the sky. Red, gold, white. From a distance, it must have looked beautiful. By morning, the official story was released. Gas leak. Mass hallucination. Panic-induced injuries. They said 12 people died. Locals say it was closer to 40. The fountain was removed. The carvings were filled with concrete. Founders' Night was canceled permanently. But every year at 9:14 p.m. the clock tower still stops. And if you stand alone in the square, you can hear bells ringing under the ground, waiting to be remembered. They were counting down to midnight in a rented lake house. 10 friends. End of the year. Phones charging. Music low. The kind of night people plan for weeks. The house was old but well maintained. The owner lived out of state. No neighbors close enough to complain. Perfect for a celebration. One detail stood out when they arrived. All the clocks in the house were stopped. Kitchen clock, wall clock, microwave. Even the clock in the car radio froze as soon as they parked in the driveway. 11:47. They laughed it off. Took pictures. Someone joked about bad wiring. By 11:58, everyone was gathered in the living room, champagne ready, TV on the countdown channel. The TV froze at 10 seconds. The audio kept going. 10, 9, 8. But the screen didn't move. They started counting along anyway. 7, 6. At 5, the lights dimmed. At 4, someone noticed the lake outside had gone completely still. No ripples. No wind. At 3, a phone vibrated. Then another. Then all of them. Every screen lit up with the same notification. Unknown reminder. You said you'd come back. No one had said it. No one remembered seeing it before. 2. The front door unlocked itself. Slowly. 1. Midnight arrived. Nothing exploded. No cheers. No fireworks. Just silence. Then the smell started. Wet earth. Old wood. Something decaying. Footsteps echoed from upstairs. But no one was supposed to be up there. They called out. No answer. A man went to the staircase and froze halfway up. He said there were wet footprints leading down the hall. Coming toward the stairs. They weren't human. Long, narrow. Too many toes. The TV clicked back to life. But it wasn't the countdown anymore. It showed a grainy home video. Same house. Same living room. But older. People stood in the same spots. Same furniture layout. Same lake outside the window. They were celebrating New Year's Eve too. The date in the corner read December 31st, 1996. Someone on screen began counting down. The faces looked familiar. Too familiar. Because they were them. Same clothes. Same expressions. At midnight, the video distorted. The people on screen began screaming. The footage cut. The TV went black. Upstairs, something fell. Art. The group ran outside. They didn't stop running until they reached the road. When police arrived, they found the house empty. No signs of forced entry. No damage. No video footage saved on the TV. Just one thing. In the guest book on the kitchen counter, a new entry had been written. 10 names. Their names. And under it, returned as promised. The house was demolished 3 months later. But every New Year's Eve, the lake freezes at 11:47. And locals swear they hear counting from the water.